The phone rang at 8:10 on the first Monday in June, and the first thing I heard was not my husband's voice. It was a child screaming somewhere behind him, a dog barking like the house was on fire, and glass coming apart on a kitchen floor I had mopped 2 days earlier. Then Dale said, "Vonnie, where are you? There are 9 kids in the driveway, and I don't know what a single one of them eats." I was 112 miles south of that kitchen. I was sitting on the front porch of an inn in Nashville, Indiana, with a plate of blackberry pie in front of me at 9 in the morning, because there was nobody left to tell me that wasn't breakfast. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything else that whole week. "They didn't fall out of the sky, Dale," I said. "You invited them." He went quiet. Behind him, somebody yelled that Rooster had gotten out through the side gate, and I heard my husband of 34 years say a word I had not heard him say since his father's funeral. This is going to be a long story, and I want to tell it right, so let me back up and say who I am before I say what I did. My name is Vonnie Prater. Everybody in Howard County, Indiana, calls me Vonnie, including 2 doctors and 1 judge. I am 61 years old, and for 29 years and 4 months, I worked as a nursing assistant at Wildcat Manor on the north side of Kokomo. I started there in 1994 at $6.40 an hour on the memory care hall, 2nd shift. I bathed people. I turned people every 2 hours so their skin wouldn't open up. I cut up chicken into pieces small enough that a man who once ran a tool and die shop wouldn't choke on his supper. I held hands at 3 in the morning with people whose own children lived 40 minutes away and came at Christmas. My knuckles have been cracked open since about 2001. That's the hand sanitizer, 12 times an hour, 30 years deep. My right shoulder never came all the way back after a resident named Delbert went down in a doorway, and I got under him instead of letting him hit the tile. I still can't reach the top shelf on that side. I tell you these things not to complain, but because they are the only receipts I have. Care work does not leave you anything to show. It leaves you a body that is a little bit used up, and a lot of people who are gone. Before I go any further, let me say welcome. If you have been with me a while, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time here, I'm glad you found your way to this porch with me. If this story touches something in you, please leave a like, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from today, because I read them and I keep them. It helps other people find these stories too, and some of them need to hear this more than they need almost anything else right now. So go ahead and hit subscribe if you'd like to stay. Now let me tell you what happened that summer, and let me tell you what I did about it, because I am not proud of all of it. I retired on the 7th of March. Not a party. They got me a sheet cake from the Kroger on Dixon Road, and the director said some things about dedication into a microphone that didn't work, and then I clocked out at 11:15 at night and drove home on empty streets, and I cried in the driveway for about 4 minutes, and then I went inside and went to bed. I had plans. That's the part I need you to understand. They were not big plans. I wanted to put in a real garden instead of 5 tomato plants in buckets. I wanted to drive out to Brown County in October and see the hills turn, which I had been saying since about 1999. I wanted 1 morning a week where I sat down with coffee and did not stand up until I felt like standing up. 29 years of 2nd shift will do that to a person. You start dreaming about being still. What I got instead was a phone that rang more than it ever had. Because here is what nobody warns you about. The day you retire, everybody around you quietly decides that you have stopped having a life. Not out of cruelty. It's simpler than cruelty. They look at your calendar, they see white space, and white space in another person's week looks like a parking spot. So I still cooked most nights. I still did the laundry and the groceries and the bills and every appointment either one of us had. And I took care of Dale's Uncle Ray, who is 88 and lives out on County Road 600 East, in a house with a ramp his neighbor built wrong. Ray has Parkinson's. His hands do a slow rolling thing, like he is always working a piece of dough that isn't there. I drove him to Indianapolis for his neurologist. I sorted his pills into the days of the week. I got his groceries, And once a month, I cut his hair on the back steps because he wouldn't go into a barber shop and shake in front of strangers. I don't mind. I never have. That is the honest truth, and it's important you know it, because otherwise the rest of this sounds like a woman who got tired of her family. Ray thanks me every single time. Ray asks. That's the whole difference right there, and I didn't know it was the whole difference until that summer. The rest of them didn't ask. If somebody needed a ride to the airport in Indianapolis, that was Vonnie. If Kendra's kids needed watching because a shift got moved, Vonnie. If Dale told his mother we'd host Easter, the phrase he used was, "We'd love to." And the person who bought $40 of ham and got up at 5 and washed everything afterward was me. And the person who carved it at the table and got told what a good son he was him. And then there were the children, 9 of them, between 4 and 12, spread across his sister Kendra's house, his brother Wendell's house, and his cousin Marla's. I love those kids. That is exactly why saying no to any of it was so hard. In that family, a boundary was never heard as a boundary. It got heard as, Aunt Vonnie doesn't want to see the kids, and then somebody's feelings were hurt, and then I was the one who had made a thing out of nothing. Now, 6 days before that phone call, on a Tuesday afternoon in the last week of May, I was carrying 2 glasses of iced tea out to the back patio for my husband and his mother. Elaine was already talking when I got to the screen door. She has a voice that carries. She was a church secretary for 22 years, and she never once had to raise it. Kendra's got 4, she was saying. Wendell and Bethany have 3. Marla's got the 2 little ones. That's 9. I stopped, with my hand on the doorframe. 9. It's only for the week, Dale said. The big ones can help with the little ones. And then my husband laughed, the same easy laugh he uses when a waitress brings the wrong order and he tells her not to worry about it, and he said the sentence that I have thought about every single day since. He said, "Just bring them on Monday. Vonnie's not doing anything anyway. She'll fuss about it for a day, and then she'll do it. She always does." The tea was sweating through my fingers, and I could not make myself push that door open. Elaine didn't laugh with him. I'll give her that much, and I'm going to spend a good while in this story, telling you what that woman did to me, so let me be fair while I still can. She waited a second, and then she said, "Dale, shouldn't you ask her first?" "There's no point in asking." "Well, I just think a person likes to be asked. Mom, she's retired. She loves those kids. If I ask, she'll make a whole production out of it, and I'll hear about it for a week. This way, it's already done." A chair scraped. "She'll get over it. She'll get over it." Like I was weather. I set the tray down on the counter without going outside. Both glasses left rings on the wood, and I didn't wipe them up, which if you knew me at all in 1994, or 2008, or that morning, you would understand was not a small thing. I want to be careful here, because when I've told this to people, they hear the number first. 9 children in one house for 5 days, ages 4 to 12, one of them still needing help in the bathroom. That is a job. Where I worked, that would have been a job for 3 aides and a schedule taped to a wall. But the number is not what did it to me. What did it to me was one word in the middle of a sentence. Anyway. Vonnie's not doing anything anyway. 29 years and 4 months, second shift, holidays, ice storms, the whole COVID stretch when we went in every day and came home and stripped in the garage. And it all came out the other side, as anyway. I almost walked out onto that patio. I had my hand flat on the door, and I had a whole speech built, and I could feel the shape of it in my chest. And then I thought, no, let him tell me. Because that's the thing I need you to hear. I did not decide anything at that screen door. I gave him 3 chances, and I counted them, and I'm going to tell you all 3, so you can judge me honestly at the end. The first one was that same night at supper. Pork chops and green beans out of a can. Because Tuesday, I said school's out next week, isn't it? Kendra's kids and all of them. He said, and got up for more iced tea. That's it. That was chance number 1, and it went by like a car on the highway. The second one was Thursday. We were in the garage, and he was looking for a socket he never finds. I said, "Dale, is anything going on next week that I should know about?" He didn't even turn around. He said, "Like what?" "Like anything." "Not that I know of." Then he said, and this is the part where something in me went cold and quiet, and stayed that way for 6 days. "Should be a nice quiet week around here. Actually, kids are out. Might get the gutters done." The third chance was Sunday night, in bed. I gave it to him with the light off, because I thought maybe in the dark it would be easier for him. I said, "Anything you want to tell me before tomorrow?" He said, "Like what, hun?" "Anything at all." He was quiet a second. Then he kissed the side of my head and said, "You worry too much. Go to sleep." I lay there in the dark with my eyes open, and I listened to my husband fall asleep in about 90 seconds, the way he has done every night of our marriage. And I thought about the suitcase already packed and sitting in the back of the guest room closet behind the winter coats, where it had been since Wednesday morning. Let me back up one day. Wednesday, the day after the screen door, I called Dot Yarbrough. Dot and I worked the same hall for 11 years. She's an LPN. She retired 2 years ahead of me, and she has never in her life said a soft thing when a hard, true one would do. Back in March, she had asked me to come down to Brown County with her in June. Her sister has a place near Story, and I told her Dale might have something going that week. He didn't have anything going. He never had anything going. I said no out of habit, the way you flinch at a thing that hasn't hit you yet. "Is that room at the inn still open?" I asked her. There was a pause long enough that I heard her turn the TV down. "What happened?" So I told her. The screen door, the counting, the anyway. Dot didn't say a word the whole time, which for Dot is practically a scream. When I finished, she said, "Are you calling me because you want me to tell you it's all right to go?" "I guess I am." "Well, I'm not going to, because you don't need me to." I booked it Wednesday morning. $68 a night, 6 nights, $408, and I paid it out of my own account, the one with my last 3 payouts of unused sick time in it. 29 years, and I had 491 hours of sick time I never used, because when you work in a place where they're already short, you go in with a fever and you keep your mask on. That's the money I spent. I want that on the record. It was not our money. It was not his money. It was the money the state of Indiana paid me for showing up on days I should have been in bed. Now, here is the part that people argue with me about, and I understand why. I did not call Kendra. I did not call Wendell, or Bethany, or Marla. I did not warn one single parent that the woman they thought was going to be watching their children was going to be 112 miles south of Kokomo, eating pie. I have gone over it 1,000 times. Here's why I didn't. If I called them, one of 2 things happens. Either they all get on the phone and by Sunday I'm apologizing for a plan I was never told about, or the whole thing gets rearranged around me, quietly, and everybody keeps exactly the same idea of me they had before. New week, same Vonnie, and in about 4 months there'd be another Tuesday and another screen door, because nothing underneath it would have moved a 1/4 of an inch. Dale made the promise. Elaine made the arrangement. For once in my life I was going to let a thing land where it was thrown. Was that fair to 9 children? No, it wasn't. I have made my peace with a lot of that summer, but I have not made my peace with that, and I'm not going to sit here 3 years later and pretend to you that I have. What I did do was this. On Saturday, I went to Menards and bought 2 of those plastic outlet covers for the front room, because the 4-year-old was into everything, and I put the good scissors up on the top shelf of the pantry, the one I can't reach on the right side, so I had to use the step stool. I taped a card with poison control and our address and the nearest urgent care on the inside of the cabinet door above the coffee maker. I set that house up for children I had already decided I was not going to be there to watch. That's who I am. That's the whole trouble, honestly. Even leaving, I was still working. I left at 10 minutes to 4 on Monday morning. Dale sleeps like a man with nothing on his conscience, which at the time I thought was funny in a way that didn't make me laugh. I carried the suitcase through the kitchen and out the side door in my sock feet, and put my shoes on, standing in the driveway in the dark. The note took me 3 tries. I wrote the first one Saturday night, and it was 2 full pages, front and back, and it had 1998 in it, and Easter of 2011, and the winter his mother broke her wrist. And reading it back, I sounded like a woman keeping books on her own marriage, which I suppose I was. I tore that one up. The second one was worse. The second one apologized. I got halfway down it and realized I was explaining myself to a man who had not explained one thing to me, and I tore that one up too. What I finally left on the counter, folded once and leaned against the coffee maker, where he'd knock it over reaching for the pot, was 4 sentences. Dale, I heard you and your mother on the patio last Tuesday. Since you agreed to watch the children without asking me, the arrangement is yours. I'll be home Sunday. I didn't sign it. I don't know why. I've thought about that. Then I did something I'm not sure I can explain even now. I drove out County Road 600 East, which is the wrong direction entirely, and I sat in front of Ray's house for about 2 minutes with my headlights off. There was one light on, the little one over his stove that stays on all night because he gets up. His car hasn't moved since 2019, and there's grass growing up around the back tire. I sat there and I thought, if anything happens to you this week, old man, I'm 2 hours away. And then I thought, and this is the thought that got me out of that driveway and onto the highway. I thought, he is not the one who forgot to ask me. Ray asks. US 31 south out of Kokomo at 4 in the morning is about the loneliest road in the state of Indiana. Semis and me. There's that long stretch past Sharpsville where there's nothing on either side, and I remember the sky started coming up gray around Tipton, and I had the window cracked because the air smelled like cut hay, and I couldn't stop shaking. Not crying. Shaking. There's a difference, and my hands knew it before I did. I got as far as the truck stop at Whitestown, and I pulled off and sat in the parking lot for a good 20 minutes, with the engine running, and I want to tell you exactly what was in my head, because I think somebody listening is sitting in a parking lot like that right now. I was not thinking about my rights. I was not thinking about respect or partnership or any of those words people use later, at the kitchen table, when it's all in the past and you've had time to make it sound reasonable. I was thinking, they're going to be scared. The 4-year-old is Marla's. Her name is Poppy, and she cries when her mother's car pulls out. The 12-year-old, Cade, is at that age where he'll try to run the whole thing, and he'll do a bad job of it, and then he'll feel terrible. I know these children. I have wiped their faces. I have been the one they hand the sticky thing to. And under that, running the whole time like a motor in another room, was the thought I'd been raised on, and married into, and worked 30 years inside of. Somebody has to. That's the sentence. It's not even a thought, it's more like a floor. Somebody has to, and if you're the one who knows how, and you're standing right there, then it's you. It's always been you. That's just how it works. I sat in that parking lot, and I said out loud, to nobody, Dale is 64 years old. He is a healthy man. He drives a parts truck 3 days a week. He has 2 vehicles, a telephone, and the number of every single parent involved, and he is the one who stood on his own patio and gave his word. I pulled back onto the highway. Around Lebanon, the sun came all the way up, and I got on 37 and went down through Martinsville with the hills starting, and by the time I came into Nashville, Indiana, it was 7:40 in the morning, and the fog was still sitting down in the low spots between the ridges, like somebody had poured it there. Dot was on the porch of the inn, with 2 cups of coffee and her reading glasses up in her hair. "You made it," she said. "I made it." She handed me the coffee and looked at my face and said, "Uh-oh." "What?" "You've still got your work face on, that thing you do where you're already 3 rooms ahead of everybody." I sat down in the chair next to her and set the coffee on the rail, and I put both hands flat on my knees to keep them still, and I said, "Dot, they're pulling into my driveway right about now." She looked at her watch. It was 7:52. 13 minutes later, my phone rang. You have already heard how it started. A child screaming, rooster barking, and glass on the floor. What I didn't tell you is that when I said, "You invited them," my husband said, "What are you talking about?" That's the honest first thing out of him. Not "I'm sorry," not "I know." What are you talking about? The note, I said. Buy the coffee pot. I heard him walk. I heard the paper. There was a stretch of about 10 seconds where the only sound was that house, doing what a house does with 9 children in it, which, if you have never heard it, is not really noise. It is more like weather inside a building. Then he said, "You heard us? Tuesday, on the patio. Then why didn't you say something?" And I laughed. I did. It came out of me before I could stop it, and it was not a nice sound. I asked you 3 times, Dale. Tuesday at supper, Thursday in the garage, and last night in the bed. You told me it was going to be a nice quiet week. Nothing. Behind him a girl's voice was hollering that Maddox took her tablet, and another one, littler, was doing that hiccuping cry that means it's been going on a while. "Vonnie, you need to come home." "No. You're better with them than I am." "Then you should have thought about that before you told your mother to send 9 of them over." "I didn't tell her to. She was the one who—" He stopped. He actually stopped himself, and I heard him hear it. "Mom and I figured you'd say yes." That is the whole problem in one sentence. He dropped his voice then, the way you do when there are people in your house. Everybody's expecting you. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth. "Vonnie, you're going to have to get their information," I said, and I switched over. I could hear myself do it, into the voice I used for 30 years when a new aide was drowning on a hall. "Get a piece of paper. You need every parent's cell, a second contact, allergies, medications, and the times, and who is allowed to pick up which child. If anybody can't tell you those 4 things, the child goes home until they can. Do it before you feed them anything." He said, "Can't you just—" And then he didn't finish it, because there was a crash somewhere in my kitchen, and a kid said, very clearly, "I didn't do that." "Dale," I said, "if a child can't breathe, or goes limp, or you can't wake them up, you call 911 and you don't call me first." The cards taped inside the cabinet over the coffee maker. "So you're not coming." "I'm not coming. You're punishing me." I looked out at the ridge across the road with that fog burning off of it, and I said, "I'm respecting a decision you made without me." Then the line went dead, and I never did find out if he hung up on me or if the call dropped, because the hollers out there are bad, and I have chosen to believe it was the hollers. Dot didn't say anything. She poured more coffee out of the carafe the inn leaves on the porch, and she let me sit there with the phone in my lap. I want to describe what happened in my body for the next hour, because I think it matters more than any speech I could give you. My hands wanted a job. That's the only way I can put it. 30 years of my hands knowing exactly what to do next, and now they had a paper coffee cup and nothing else, and they kept starting things. I got up twice. Once I got all the way to my car with my keys in my hand, and I stood there in that gravel lot, and I could see the whole rest of the day like a map. 2 hours up 37. Walk in about noon. 20 minutes and that house would be running, because I would run it. Sandwiches at 12:15. The little ones down at 1. Cade on the hose in the backyard with the big ones, so the house stayed quiet. Every parent's number on the fridge in my handwriting by 2 o'clock. And Dale would have said, "Thank God," and hugged me, and told his mother it all worked out fine. That's what stopped me. Not principle, that picture. Because I have lived that picture maybe 200 times, and every single time, the lesson that got learned in that house was that his way works. I don't mind. I never have. I stood in that parking lot and heard myself say it in my head, that same sentence I have said my entire life, and for the first time, it did not sound like kindness. It sounded like a woman reading her own job description off a wall. I went back up on the porch. I did send him 2 texts. I'm not a martyr, and I'm not made of stone, and I was not going to let a child get hurt to make a point. The first one said, "First aid kit is in the hall closet on the shelf above the towels, the blue tackle box." The second one said, "Ray's medication list and his doctor's number are taped inside his pantry door if anybody calls you about him this week." 14 minutes later, he texted back. It said, "You should have told me you were leaving." I typed for a while. I deleted it. What I finally sent was 7 words. "You should have told me 9 were coming." He didn't answer. And then, because it was 10 in the morning in Brown County, Indiana, and there was nothing on this earth I could do about any of it, Yarbrough put her hand on my arm and said, "Come on. There's a woman down in Nashville sells pie by the slice at 9 in the morning and doesn't ask anybody's business." So that is where I was, and what I was doing, when the first car came back up my driveway at 11 o'clock to pick up a child. Not because anybody had a change of heart. Because Elaine had started making phone calls, and what she was telling people was not what was happening. Elaine's voicemail came in at 11:40 on Monday morning. I didn't answer. I listened to it standing outside a shop on Van Buren Street, holding a paper bag with a jar of apple butter in it. Her voice was calm. That's the thing about my mother-in-law. She has never once had to yell to get a thing done in this world. "Yvonne, this has gone far enough. Dale is in over his head, and Marla had to leave work over it. I don't know what point you're trying to make, but there are innocent children in the middle of it, and I think you know that. Come home." That was the whole message. I played it twice, standing there in the sun, and here is what I was listening for, and here is what was not in it. Not one word about asking me, not one word about a plan I was never in. 22 seconds of message, and every single second of it was about what I had done. Dot came out of the shop and saw my face. She said, "The mother-in-law? How'd you know?" "You've got the same look my sister gets at the DMV." By noon, the family group chat was going, and I want to walk you through it slowly because this is where the floor started coming up. Kendra went first. Kendra is Dale's younger sister, 48, does hair out of a room off her garage, 4 kids, and she is the kind of person who says exactly what she thinks and then acts hurt that you heard it. She wrote, "I thought Aunt Vonnie agreed to this." Wendell wrote, "Mom told us it was all set up on her end." Marla wrote, "Did anybody actually talk to Vonnie about it? Like directly?" And then that question sat there. Nobody answered it. For 4 minutes nobody typed anything, and if you have ever watched a family chat go quiet, you know that silence has a shape to it. Then Elaine wrote, "Vonnie loves those children. We had every reason to believe she would help. Nobody expected her to disappear without a word." I read that one about 6 times. Without a word. I gave that man 3 of them. I was still looking at it when Bethany came in. Bethany is Wendell's wife. She's the youngest of the whole bunch, 36, works at the eye clinic on Markland. She wrote one message, and then she wrote another one, about 10 seconds later. The first one said, "Wait." The second one said, "I asked Elaine last week about Deacon's inhaler and his action plan. She told me Vonnie already had all of that, and not to worry about it. Is that not true?" I stood up so fast, the porch chair went back on 2 legs. Deacon is 7. He is Wendell and Bethany's middle one. He has asthma, the moderate kind, the kind that is fine for 11 months, and then one afternoon is not fine at all. He carries a rescue inhaler in the side pocket of a blue backpack, and there is a green and yellow and red chart that goes with it, that tells you what to do at each color. I had never seen that chart in my life. Nobody had ever handed me anything. I did not know that boy was in my house until I heard his grandmother counting heads through a screen door. I typed, "I do not have Deacon's inhaler or his plan. I have never been given anything for any of these children. Bethany, call Dale right now and walk him through it." The little dots came up under Bethany's name and went away and came up again. And while all of that was happening on my telephone, on a porch 112 miles south, it was 91 degrees in Howard County, Indiana, and my husband was out in the backyard with the mower running, and 7 children were in and out of the side door, and Rooster was rolling in the cut grass, and then coming in and getting up on the furniture. It was already going wrong. It had been going wrong for about an hour, and nobody in that house knew it yet. I did not see any of what I'm about to tell you. I have put it together from Dale, from Bethany, and from a 12-year-old boy who told me the truest version of it about 3 weeks later, while we were shelling peas. Monday afternoon, Dale decided the way to survive was to get everybody outside. That was not a bad instinct. That was probably the only good call he made all day. He put the big kids on the trampoline, and he got the mower out, because in that man's mind, a yard that needs mowing is an emergency, and a house full of children is a situation. Deacon didn't want the trampoline. Deacon is a sitter. He got down in the grass with Rooster, who had been rolling in fresh clippings all afternoon, and he had his arms around that dog's neck, and he stayed there a good long while. Cade, the 12-year-old, is the one who noticed. Cade told me the boy was doing that thing where he was talking, but only 3 or 4 words at a time, and stopping in between. That's what he said to me. He said he'd say a little bit, and then he'd have to get more air, Aunt Vonnie. Cade went and stood in front of the mower and waved his arms until his uncle shut it off. Dale says Deacon told him he was fine. I believe that part. 7-year-olds say they're fine. 7-year-olds with asthma say they're fine because the whole rest of their life is people making a fuss and taking them inside. They went in. Dale gave him a glass of water and put him on the couch with the ceiling fan on, and he went back out to finish the yard. Because in his head, a boy sitting quiet on a couch is a boy who is doing better. A boy sitting quiet, with his shoulders coming up around his ears, is a boy who is doing worse. It was Cade again, 12 years old. He came out the side door and he yelled, "Uncle Dale, he's making a noise." That noise is a wheeze on the way out, and it is one of maybe 4 sounds in this world I can pick out of a dead sleep. I heard it for 30 years down a hallway with 2 doors shut between me and it. Dale called Bethany. Bethany was at the eye clinic on Markland with a patient in the chair, and she left her standing there, and she said one sentence into the phone. Blue backpack, front pocket, the plastic tube, 4 puffs. Now, here's what got Dale, and here is the thing I have never once thrown in his face, because that whole week did enough to him without my help. There were 9 backpacks in my front room. 9. In a pile. Because when you take in 9 children with no list, no names taped to anything, no parent to hand you a rundown at the door, what you get is a pile. He said it took him a minute and a half to find it. He said that to me on the phone that night, and his voice did a thing I had not heard in 34 years. He said, 90 seconds, Vonnie. I counted them after. It was 90 seconds, and I have never been that scared. He got the 4 puffs in. He called 911, and he sat on the floor by the couch and kept the boy sitting up and forward, the way Bethany told him, and he did not leave that spot until the ambulance came up the driveway. They took Deacon to Community Howard on Berkeley Road. Nebulizer treatment, a dose of steroids, and they kept him about 4 hours to watch him. He was home that night by 9, on the couch at his own house, watching something with a talking dog in it and eating a red popsicle. He does not remember much about it. Bethany told me later, he tells it now like an adventure, and that the ambulance men let him hold the tubing. I got the call at 4:15. Dale said Deacon had an attack. He's all right. He's at the hospital. He's all right. I'm telling you first that he's all right. I sat down on the end of a bed in a room in an inn in Brown County, Indiana, and I put my hand flat on my chest and held it there. I want to tell you what I felt, and I want to tell you the true order of it, not the order that would make me look better. First was terror. That's the professional part. That's 30 years. That's the picture that comes up in your head before you can stop it, because I have seen what a bad one looks like. Second was relief. He's all right. And third, right behind it, so fast the 2 of them were practically holding hands, was this. If I had been in that house, that would not have happened. Because it wouldn't have. I would have taken one look at 9 children coming out of 3 cars, and I would have had every parent standing in my driveway with their phone out, telling me names and medicines and numbers, before anybody's car left. That is not a virtue. That is 30 years of muscle memory. You don't take report from nobody and start a shift. And that is exactly what my husband was counting on. He wasn't counting on it out of meanness. He wasn't even counting on it on purpose. He was counting on it the way you count on the floor being there, when you swing your legs out of bed in the morning. I had been the floor for 34 years. On Monday, the floor was in Brown County, and everybody found out at the same time how far the drop was. Here's the part I have not made peace with, and I'm going to say it plain, because I know how it sounds to some of you. If I had stayed home, that boy would have been fine on Monday. And in September, there would have been another Tuesday and another screen door. The question I could not stop turning over that night, lying on my back in a strange room with the window unit rattling, was whether I had the right to let a system fail while a 7-year-old was standing in it. I still don't know. I want to be honest with you about that. 3 years later, I still don't have a clean answer, and anybody who gives you one about their own life is selling something. What I do know is what came in on my phone at 10:30 that night, from Bethany. He's home, he's fine, he's eating a popsicle and telling his brother the ambulance had a computer in it. And then, a minute later, "Vonnie, I'm so sorry, I really thought you knew about him." I asked her twice. I read those 2 messages about 4 times, and then I went back to the group chat, and I scrolled up to Elaine's line about how nobody expected me to disappear, and I sat there in the dark with the phone lighting up my face. Twice. Bethany had asked her twice. That was Monday. On Tuesday morning, Marla sent me a photograph, and after I looked at it, I understood that I had not been fighting about 1 week at all. Marla is Dale's cousin, 33, 2 little ones, and she is the only person in that family who has ever apologized to me first and asked questions second. She had gone over to Elaine's on Tuesday morning to drop off a casserole dish, and Elaine was on the phone in the front room, and Marla was standing in that kitchen waiting, and she took a picture of the wall by the refrigerator and sent it to me with 3 words underneath it. "Vonnie, look at this." It was Elaine's calendar, the big paper kind the funeral home on Sycamore gives out every December, 1 month to a page, squares big enough to write in. She has hung that same calendar in that same spot since Reagan was president. June was showing, and in the squares, in Elaine's handwriting, in pencil, were the following words. The first week of June, across 5 days, in one long line, kids at V&D. The 15th through the 17th, Kendra Hair Show Indy. V has the 4. The 22nd, Ray to Indy Neuro. V. The 28th, Wendell and Beth Anniversary. V. Overnight. Then Marla sent the next picture, and it was July, and July had my initial in 11 squares. Vacation Bible School Week, the little ones after, V. The 4th, Food at Elaine's, V here by 9. 2 more of Ray's appointments. A week in the middle of the month, with a line drawn all the way across it that said Kendra Gatlinburg. V has the kids, and my whole chest went hot when I saw that one, because Kendra had not so much as mentioned Gatlinburg to me. Not once. Not in passing at Easter. Not on the phone. Nowhere. And then Marla flipped back and sent me April, because April was still on the nail underneath, and there it was. April 4th. Written in the corner of the square in pencil, small. Ask D about June. Don't ask V yet. Don't ask V yet. I sat down on the edge of the bed at that inn with the phone in my hand, and I did not move for a while. Dot knocked on the wall between our rooms and hollered was I coming to breakfast, and I didn't answer her. 2 months. She wrote that in April, and she carried it in her head all through Easter, when I roasted a ham and washed 19 plates, and all through May, when I drove her to get her eyes checked, and sat in that waiting room for an hour and 40 minutes, with a magazine from 2 years ago. All that time, that woman knew, and the plan already had a rule in it. Don't ask V yet. Not don't ask V. Yet. Meaning, there's an order to this. Meaning, we tell her when it's late enough that saying no would cost her more than saying yes. I have thought about the difference between those two words more than almost anything else from that summer. If she'd written, "Don't ask V," that's a woman going behind your back. Yet as a woman who has done this so many times, she has a procedure. Once I could see it, I could see all of it. That's the trouble with a thing like this. You spend 14 years thinking you are having a series of small, unrelated conversations, and then one photograph turns the whole thing into a system. 2011, Elaine's oven went out the week of Thanksgiving. Dale came in and said, "I told Mom we'd just do it here. Keep it simple." Simple was 23 people. I took 3 days off, and I remember exactly what it cost, because gas was $4.11 that year, and I made 4 trips to the Kroger. Dale carved. Dale got told what a good son he was, standing there with the electric knife. 2016, Kendra had her gallbladder out. Dale told the whole family we'd take care of meals. I made everything, I labeled everything, I drove it over, and Kendra hugged him at the door and said, "Your brother's a saint," to Bethany, right in front of me, with my crock pot in her hands. 2019, Ray's cataracts. Dale said, "I'll take Dad's brother, don't worry about it." Then a run came up for the parts route. I drove Ray to Indianapolis at 5:30 in the morning, sat there through it, picked up his drops, and slept in his spare room that smells like Vicks and cedar, so I could put the drops in at 3-hour intervals. And every single time, that man thanked me. That's what makes this so hard to explain to people who want a villain with a mustache. He'd kiss the side of my head and say, "I don't know what I'd do without you." He meant it. He absolutely meant it. He just never once thought about the fact that he had made the promise, and I had done the work. Because in his head, those were the same act. The way you don't separate deciding to lift your arm from lifting it. I thought gratitude was respect. I want to say that out loud for anybody listening who is on the same road I was on. I thought a man who thanks you is a man who sees you. But here is the part I owe you, and I've been building up to it since I started talking. That calendar was on that wall in plain sight. Every one of us saw it. I have stood in that kitchen 100 times and looked right at it. And in 14 years, not once did I say, "Elaine, what's my initial doing in that square?" She wrote V in the box, because V had always shown up. She wasn't guessing. She had 14 years of data. I told Dot about it at breakfast, and she read the whole thing twice, and then she put my phone face down on the table. "You know what this is," she said. "This isn't a mother-in-law being pushy. This is a schedule. You don't schedule a favor, you schedule labor." I said, "She's 83 years old, Dot." So she's from a different time. Women did this. Her mother-in-law did it to her. I know that for a fact. Dot picked up her coffee and looked at me over the top of it and said the sentence that got me through the next 11 days. "Vonnie, that explains her. It doesn't excuse her. Those are 2 different jobs, and you keep doing the wrong one." I wanted to be angry. I want you to know I gave it a real try, sitting there with my eggs going cold. But underneath the anger was something worse, and it took me the rest of that day to get my hands around it. If my entire summer was already written on a wall in Kokomo, Indiana in pencil, then what exactly did the family think I was? And who, in 14 years, had ever once paid for any of it? That question turned out to have an answer. It just took me until Sunday afternoon, at my own dining room table, in front of everybody, to hear it. Ray called me Wednesday evening. He is 88 years old, and he still dials a telephone like it costs money, which is to say he gets right to it. "Vonnie, is the boy all right?" "He's fine, Ray. Home since Monday night." "Good." A long breath. Then, "My nephew came out here yesterday." I sat down on the porch steps. "Did he?" Sat right there in the recliner, where his daddy used to sit, and told me the whole thing. Wanted me to say you'd gone too far. Ray has a voice like a gravel road. I said, "Well, how many kids was it?" He said 9. I said, And how many did you ask her about? He got real quiet. I laughed and it turned into something else about halfway out. I asked him another one too, Ray said. I said, Dale, who takes me to Indianapolis? He said, Vonnie does. I said, how many times this year, son? He didn't know. I told him, 9 times since January, and one of those we sat 4 hours because they were backed up, and she never said one word about it. And I asked him, how many have you taken me to? Ray, don't. None, Vonnie. That's the number. It's none, the recliner creaked. And I told him, I said, your wife retired. She didn't die. Retired means she gets her time back. It don't mean it goes in the pot for everybody else. I put my hand over my eyes, even though there was nobody on that porch but me. Now listen, he said. I want to say a thing and then I'm going to hang up. Because this phone hurts my hand. I've been taking from you too. I know it. I say thank you every time like that squares it. And it don't. A thank you don't buy gas. Ray, you're the only one who asks. Well, he said, asking's the least a man can do, and I've been getting a lot of credit for the least a man can do. Before he hung up, he said something that went right past me at the time. He said, don't worry about my Thursday. Neither. The girl comes. I said, what girl? The girl that comes Tuesdays and Thursdays. Little short gal. Drives a red car. Gets me in the shower. And does the bed and puts the trash out. I stood up off those steps. Ray, who is that? Since when? Since about February, I reckon. Eileen set it up. Tasha, her name is. He said it like I should have known. $18 an hour, 2 hours a morning, twice a week. Eileen says the family chips in for it. I said, very carefully, because 30 years of asking questions in doorways teaches you how to keep your voice flat. The family chips in. That's what she tells me. I have never in my life been asked to chip in for 1 dime of that. Not once. Not a text, not a plate passed at Thanksgiving, nothing. And here is what I thought, standing there in the dark, in Brown County, Indiana, with the crickets going. I thought, somebody in this family, all this time, has known exactly what it costs to have a person come to your house and put their hands on an old man and make his life work. $18 an hour. Somebody sat down and priced it and paid it. Which meant that when they looked at me, they were not failing to see the work. They knew what the work was worth. They just weren't paying that price for mine. I didn't have the rest of it yet. I want to be clear about that. I didn't put it together on that porch, and if anybody tells this story like the woman figured it all out in one clever flash, that's television. What I had was a splinter, and I went to bed with it. The next day I bought a spiral notebook at the drugstore in Nashville, 79 cents, the kind with the wide blue lines like a school kid uses. I have it in a drawer in my kitchen right now. And on the first page, I wrote a question across the top, and I want to give you the exact wording, because getting the question right took me most of the morning. I did not write, what does Dale have to do to make this right? Apologies had never been in short supply in my marriage. That man could apologize the paint off a wall. What was in short supply was change. What I wrote was this: what would have to be true for me to go home and stay married? Then I sat under a tree in a public park, with a notebook on my knee, like a woman of 61 has any business doing, and I wrote 4 things. 1. Nobody commits my time but me. Not my husband, not his mother, ever. If somebody needs me, the request comes to my face or my phone, from the person who needs it. 2. Any childcare comes directly from the parent, with names, phone numbers, medicines, allergies, and pickup written down on paper before the car leaves my driveway. If it isn't written down, the answer is no. That one is not up for discussion, and it never will be. And if any of you have ever worked a hall, you know exactly why. 3. Dale takes half, not helps with half, takes half the house, and half of Ray, which means half the appointments, half the pills, half the grocery runs, on his own calendar, without me reminding him. 4. And I sat with this one a long time. I wrote it, I crossed it out, I wrote it again. 4. If he volunteers my time again, or hides a plan from me again, I will move out and file for a legal separation. I want to tell you the truth about that fourth one. Writing it did not make me feel powerful. It made me feel sick. I sat under that tree and cried, which I had not done all week, not on the highway, not when Deacon went to the hospital, not looking at that calendar. Because I love my husband. That's the inconvenient thing. I have loved that man since I was 26 years old, and he changed my tire in the parking lot of a bowling alley in the rain and would not take $5 for it. But somewhere in 34 years, loving him had turned into a job with no hours, and I had been the one who let it. That's the part I have to own. Elaine wrote V in the box, and Dale said yes on my behalf, but I trained them both. Every time I sighed and did it anyway, I was teaching a class. 14 years of them. There's a woman in this story I got wrong too, and I'll say it now. Bethany. For 6 or 7 years I thought that girl was cold to me. She'd come to things and stand by the door with her keys in her hand. I decided she thought she was above us, the way you decide things about people when you're tired. That week she told me she had asked Elaine 4 separate times, going back to Deacon's diagnosis, to please just have Vonnie call me directly so I can go over his plan with her. And 4 times Elaine had told her, "Honey, don't bother Vonnie with all that. She's got a lot on her." She wasn't cold. She was being managed, same as me, and she'd been standing by that door with her keys because she never once got to talk to me without a woman in between. I was wrong about her for 7 years. It took me a week in a hospital to see it, and I've never quite forgiven myself for how long it took. On Saturday morning, my phone rang, and it was Dale, and he did not sound like a man calling to argue. "The house is quiet," he said. That was his opener. Not hello. The parents had come and gotten everybody by Wednesday. Kendra put her 4 in a day camp out at the IMCA. Wendell and Bethany traded shifts. Marla's boss let her go to 7 to 3. It turned out that a thing everybody had sworn was impossible got solved in about 36 hours, once there was no other option standing in the kitchen with an apron on. "Vonnie," he said, "I've been sitting here. All right. Mom says you're doing this to embarrass me in front of the family. That's not an answer to anything I asked you." He was quiet a second. I could hear the ice maker going in my own kitchen 112 miles away, and I have to tell you, that little sound about took the legs out from under me. Then he said it. "I didn't ask you because I knew what you'd say." Neither one of us said anything for a while after that. It had come out of him fast, the way the true one does, and I think it surprised him as much as it did me. "Say that back to yourself," I said. "I know how it sounds." "I don't think you do. You knew I'd say no, so instead of hearing no, you arranged it so I'd never get the chance to say it, and then you'd hand me 9 children at 8 in the morning and let the shame do the rest." My voice was not shaking, and I remember being surprised about that too. "That's not a man who forgot to mention something, Dale. That's a plan." "It wasn't a plan. It was Mom, and it was easier, and He stopped. I liked being the one who said yes. There it was. The whole thing in 7 words. He liked being the one who said yes. He got to be the good son on the patio, the good brother on the phone, the good uncle at the cookout. He got the thank yous. He got, "Your brother's a saint," said over a crock-pot he'd never once plugged in. "You've been buying that with my time for 34 years, I said. "And you got a discount, because it never showed up on any bill." "I know." "Do you?" "I'm learning it," he said, and I'll give him that, because it was more honest than yes. Then he told me about Sunday. "Mom's called everybody over here. Sunday at 3. She says the family needs to clear the air." I looked out at the ridgeline, going gold at the top, and I said, "At our house?" "At our house." "And what does she actually want, Dale?" "Not what she said. What does she want?" He didn't answer for a good 5 seconds, and that was answer enough, but I waited him out, because I have waited out better than him. "She wants you to apologize," he said, "in front of everybody. She thinks if you say you're sorry for leaving, then everything goes back to how it was. I want to tell you what I felt, and it was not anger. I had used most of that up on a park bench with a 79-cent notebook. What I felt was almost like relief, because for the first time all week, somebody had told me the truth about what this actually was. Elaine had not called a meeting to clear the air. Air doesn't need a chairwoman. She had called a meeting to put me back in the box on the calendar, in front of witnesses, so that the next time she wrote a V in a square, everybody in that room would remember what happened to a woman who walked out of one. "I'll be there," I said. I was coming home Sunday anyway. "Vonnie." He sounded tired in a way I had not heard from him. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to bring a notebook." I hung up and sat there a long time, and then I called Ray, and I asked him one question. I asked him if he'd be willing to come to a thing on Sunday afternoon at 3, and if I sent somebody for him, would he ride? He said, "Who's driving?" I said, "Marla." And that old man said, "Then I'll be there at 4:45, and I'll wear the good shirt." I came up 31 on Sunday and turned onto our street at 10 after 12, and my stomach went tight the way it does at the top of a hill. Everything looked exactly the same. The flower beds needed water. Rooster was up in the front window with his ears going. Dale came out before I got the trunk open and took my suitcase, and he didn't try to hug me, which was the smartest thing that man did all summer. The carpets had been cleaned. There was a new lamp in the corner that didn't match anything. And his clothes were hanging in the spare room, which I had not asked for and did not comment on. "I told them," he said, "Wendell and Marla, that you never agreed. Did you tell them why you said I had?" He looked at the floor. "I told them I knew you'd say no. That mattered. Not enough. But it mattered, and I'm the kind of woman who counts what mattered." Ray came at 4:45, in a blue shirt buttoned to the top, Marla holding his elbow up the step. Kendra came at 3 on the dot with her husband. Wendell and Bethany came without the kids, because I had said no children, and that was the one thing everybody agreed to without argument. Elaine came in without knocking, which she has done for 34 years, and she sat down at the head of my dining room table. I let her. I want you to know that was on purpose. Let her sit at the head of it. "I hope we can settle this like adults," she said. What happened was unfortunate, but Yvonne's decision to leave without a word created a great deal of chaos, and it put a child in danger, and I think we all know that. "Mom," Dale said. "I'm speaking." "No," I said. "You're rewriting." The room went quiet, the way a room does when the person who never says anything says something. I put my phone on the table, face up, with the picture of her June calendar filling the screen, and I slid it down toward the middle where everybody could reach it. "Before anybody says another word about what I did," I said, "I want everyone in this room to look at that." Kendra picked it up first. Wendell leaned over her shoulder. Bethany took it next, and I watched her scroll, and I watched her get to July, and I watched her face when she got to the line about Gatlinburg. "Kendra," Bethany said quietly, "did you tell Vonnie about Gatlinburg?" Kendra's mouth opened and closed. "Flip back one more," I said. "There's April." Marla, who already knew what was on it, said it out loud for the room, because I asked her to, and she is braver than she looks. She read it flat. "Ask D about June. Don't ask V yet." Nobody breathed for a second. I laid out the rest without raising my voice, and I had it in order because I had written it in a 79-cent notebook under a tree. I said, "I never agreed to watch 9 children. I was never asked. I was never given one name, one telephone number, one medicine, one allergy, one pickup time. I found out through a screen door. I gave Dale 3 chances over 6 days to tell me himself, and he told me it was going to be a quiet week. And Bethany asked twice about her son's inhaler, and was told, by the woman at the head of this table, that I had it." "I assumed you did," Elaine said. "How could I have information about an arrangement nobody ever mentioned to me?" "I was trying to reassure her," Bethany said. "You reassured me with something that wasn't true, and my 7-year-old rode in an ambulance. He's fine, Elaine said. And Bethany, who I had spent 7 years believing was cold, sat up straight in my dining room chair and said, "That is not the same thing as it being all right." Then Kendra did what Kendra does, which is come out swinging when she's cornered. "Okay, but everybody's acting like Vonnie was doing us some huge free favor," she said. "We paid." "Excuse me. I gave Mom $150 a week, same as always, and I don't appreciate sitting here being made out to be a freeloader." I did not move. "You gave who what?" I said. "Mom $150 a week for the weeks she has our kids. Wendell does too." She looked around the table for backup. "That's how we've always done it." Wendell said slowly, "Since summer before last." Marla said, "I give her 100. For my 2. I have been in rooms where somebody codes. I know what it feels like when the air changes. This was that." "Elaine," I said, "in 2 years, how much money have you collected from these 3 households for me?" She didn't answer. Wendell got out his phone and started adding it up right there at my table, and his hands were not steady. 2 summers, the weeks penciled in and the weekends and the 2 anniversaries and the hair shows. He got to $2,940, and he stopped and set the phone down like it was hot. "Vonnie," he said, "did you ever get any of that?" "Not $1, not one, ever." Kendra said, "Mom." And Ray, who had been sitting quiet at the far end in his good shirt, with his hands doing that slow roll in his lap, said, in that gravel road voice, "Elaine, tell them who pays Tasha." That's the moment. If this were a movie, that's where the music would come in. Elaine put both hands flat on my table and she said, "I do." "Who's Tasha?" Kendra said. "She's a home health aide," I said. "She comes to Ray's Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 hours a morning, $18 an hour. She's been coming since February. Everybody in this room but me apparently knew that." I turned and looked at my mother-in-law. "You've been paying a professional to take care of your brother, with money 3 families gave you for me." "Yes," she said. Not a flinch, not a story. "Yes." And then she said the thing I have not been able to put down since. "Because if I pay her, she comes." Kendra said, "Mom, what does that even mean?" Elaine did not look at her. She looked straight at me, 83 years old, back like a fence post, and she said, "It means I could not lift my brother anymore. I'm not able. And I couldn't ask this family to pay for it, because the first thing every one of you would have said is, 'Well, why can't Vonnie do it?' And you would have, Kendra. You'd have said it before the sentence was out of my mouth." Nobody argued with her. That's the part. Nobody in that room argued. "And Vonnie would have done it," she went on. "She'd have said yes, and she'd have come Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she'd have never taken a dime. Until one day she'd have been tired, or sick, or gone. She stopped, and I saw her chin go, one time, and then she got it back. Ray can't have that. Ray's 88. He needs somebody who has to show up. If I pay her, she comes. If I ask you, you come until you don't." Nobody said anything for a long moment, and I want to be honest with all of you, because I promised I would be. That is the only time in 14 years I have understood that woman all the way down. She knew exactly what care is worth. She priced it out at $18 an hour and paid it every week for the one person in this world she was scared of losing. She knew. She has always known. She just decided that the reliable kind, the kind that shows up because it has to, gets bought. And the free kind, the kind that shows up because it loves you and can't say no, gets scheduled. "Elaine," I said, and my voice went somewhere I didn't plan. "You were the only person in this family who understood what I do all day, and you used it as a coupon." She didn't deny it. Kendra shoved back from the table. "This is ridiculous. She's 83, Vonnie. You dragged her in here in front of everybody to do this. Over a week of babysitting." "Sit down," Wendell said. "No, she left 9 kids in a driveway, and now we're all supposed to be sorry for her." Kendra picked up her purse. "I have kids to get." "Kendra," Bethany said. Deacon was in the emergency room. And whose fault is that? That's the sentence. Right there. That's the one that ended it, and she said it in my dining room, and she has never taken it back. I stood up. Mine, I said. Some of it. I'll carry that piece, and I'll carry it a long time, and here is the rest of it. I looked around that table, at all of them. For 14 years, every time one of you needed something, I said, I don't mind. I never have. I said it so many times you all built a house on it. I picked up my notebook off the sideboard and held it. Not open, just held it. I mind, I said. I've minded for about 14 years, and I'm just now saying it out loud, and every one of you is going to have to be uncomfortable while I get used to the sound of it. Kendra left. The screen door hit twice the way it does. And Elaine sat at the head of my table with all her children looking at her, and for the first time since I married into that family, not one of them was waiting for her to tell them what happens next. Here is what happened to the money, since I know somebody's going to ask. I didn't take it. Wendell wanted to write me a check that night for his share, and I told him no, and I'll tell you why. That money was collected for a job I never agreed to do. Taking it after the fact would have made it a paid job, retroactively, and it wasn't. It was theft of a different kind, and I wasn't going to launder it by cashing it. What I told them to do instead was this: split Tasha's cost 4 ways in the open, with a number everybody sees, and let Elaine stop carrying it alone in the dark, like it was something to be ashamed of. Wendell set it up before he left my house that night, on his phone, at my table. Marla put in for a half share, because she has less, and nobody argued with her about it. Tasha's up to 3 mornings a week now. She got a raise in January. She and I text about Ray's swallowing, and she is the only person in this entire story who has ever had the sense to write things down without being told. Now, the rest of it. I gave Dale the notebook that night, after everybody was gone and the chairs were pushed back in, and the house was so quiet you could hear the refrigerator. He read all 4. He got to the 4th one, the one about the legal separation, and he read it twice, and his face went the color of paper. You'd really go. I already went, I said. The only difference next time is that I wouldn't tell you I'd be back Sunday. He didn't argue, and he didn't get soft about it, either. He said, okay. Then he said, I don't want you to take them down off the fridge when things get better. Leave them up. They're still up. 3 years. The tape's gone yellow. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the man turned into somebody else, because that's the kind of ending that makes people at home feel worse about their own lives. Here's what he actually did. He took Ray. Not helped with Ray, took him. He learned that the neurology entrance in Indianapolis is the one on the west side of the building because it's 40 fewer steps, and he learned that Ray gets mean about an hour before an appointment because he's scared, not because he's mean. He learned it by driving him 9 times in a row without me in the car. He cooks Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. It's chili, baked chicken, and spaghetti, in rotation, forever, world without end. I have not once fixed the rotation, and I never will. He paid for the carpets and the lamp and Bethany's emergency room copay out of his own account, and when the bill from the ambulance came, he put it on the counter where I'd see it, and he didn't say anything about it, and I didn't either. And in July, 3 weeks after, the test came, which is the only part of any of this that actually proves anything. Wendell called on a Tuesday morning. His sitter fell through, and he needed somebody until noon. I was standing right there at the sink. And I watched my husband open his mouth, and I watched the first shape of it come out. Vonnie, could you? And then I watched him stop dead in the middle of my kitchen, with the phone against his ear. He said, hang on, Wendell. He put his hand over it. He said to me, I almost did it again. I said, you caught it. I shouldn't have to catch it. No, I said, but this is what it looks like when a person's changing. It doesn't look like never wanting to. It looks like catching it. Then he took his hand off the phone and told his own brother, Bud, I've got Ray at 10. Let me help you call around. Now the part I owe you, Because I promised you the honest kind. Some of it never came back. Kendra has not spoken to me in 3 years, not one word. She sends a card at Christmas with her name and her husband's name printed on it, and nothing written by hand. Her 4 grew up in that time. The oldest graduated in May, and I heard about it from Marla. I loved those kids. I taught the middle girl to make pie crust standing on a chair at my counter, and I have not had a conversation with her since she was 11 years old. That's the price. I want anybody listening who's thinking about drawing a line to know that a line costs something, and anybody who tells you it doesn't has never drawn one. And the Sunday dinners are over. 34 years of them. At Elaine's. 1 o'clock. The same 6 casserole dishes. She stopped hosting that fall, and nobody picked it up, and I have to tell you that I grieve that more than I expected to, and that I am the reason it ended. Elaine and I are not close. I want to be careful not to hand you something prettier than what I've got. But she asks now. That's the whole change, and it's not nothing. Last October she called me directly, and she said, "Yvonne, I need a ride to the eye doctor on the 14th, and if that's a bad day for you, say so, and I'll call the van." I said I'd take her. And in the car, somewhere on Markland, she said, without looking over, "My mother-in-law had me for 11 years. I cried in a laundry room over it more than once." I said, "Elaine, that explains it. It doesn't excuse it." She said, "I know the difference." And that was the whole conversation, and we rode the rest of the way listening to the radio. That calendar still hangs by her refrigerator. There's no V in any of the squares. She writes people's actual names now, and she writes them after she's asked. Now let me tell you the good part, because there is one, and it's the reason I'm still telling this story 3 years later. That August, the township put out a notice that the community building on North Main needed somebody to run a summer program. 9 to 2, 12 weeks, 32 kids, ages 5 to 12. Yarbrough sent me the notice with one line under it. "You're already qualified, and you've been doing it for free." I applied. I got it. $18 an hour. You heard me. The exact same number. I have thought about that a great deal. That every hour of the thing I had been handing out for nothing my whole life turned out to have a price on it all along, and it was written down on a county form, and nobody was hiding it. It was just that no one had ever put it next to my name. I ran it that first summer, and I've run it 3 now. And on the first Monday of every June, there is a folding table by the door, and on that table is a clipboard, and nobody's child comes through that doorway until a parent has written down a name, 2 phone numbers, medicines, allergies, and who is allowed to pick them up. Deacon came the 2nd year. He's 10 now. His inhaler lives in a plastic bin on the shelf with his name on masking tape, and there's a green and yellow and red chart taped inside the cabinet door, and every one of my staff can find it in 4 seconds because I timed them. Cade, the 12-year-old who stood in front of that mower and waved his arms, worked for me as a junior counselor at 15. He was the best one I had. I told him that in front of his mother. And Poppy, Marla's littlest, the one who used to cry when her mother's car pulled out, came up to my folding table on the first day of that first summer, 4 years old, and asked me if I worked there. I said, "Yes, honey, I work here." That was the first time in my life I ever got to say it about the thing I'm actually good at. So if you're out there listening to me right now, and your name is written in pencil in somebody else's calendar square, and you've been telling yourself you don't mind, I'd just ask you one thing. Say it out loud and hear how it lands. I don't mind. I never have. If it sounds like love, then go on and keep going, and God bless you, because this world runs on people like us. But if it sounds like a job description, then somebody has been reading it to you off a wall. Retirement is not free time. Care is work. And a woman going quiet is not a woman agreeing. If any part of this sat on your chest while you listened, tell me about it down in the comments, because I read every one of them and I keep them. And if you've got a story of your own that sounds like mine, I hope you'll stay with me, because there's another one coming. That summer, my family found out they could ask me for my time. They just found out they could not spend it.